In this video, I'll look at getting textures in my materials, so I can have a wall mural at the end, floor tile, and a tiled base around the room. What I'll start out with, though, is quickly getting some materials on the chandeliers to show how to deal with groups. If you've selected a chandelier, you can see the bounding box shows one object. However, this is a group of two objects, the shade and the bronze housing. What we need to do then is to select these chandeliers by pressing H for the Select from Scene dialog, picking them all, and then opening those groups. I'll select my chandeliers and click OK, and so we can see it clearer, I'll isolate that selection. Now I'll choose Group, Open, and I can pick those objects, again pressing H for Select from Scene and choosing Display, Expand All. There's the pieces, the glass and the frame for each one. I'll pick the chandelier glass and then press M to pull up my material editor and assign a glass material to it. In the material editor, you can see I've added a few more materials. Additional wall colors and ceiling colors, plus a bronze and a chrome, and also a lit glass material. The bronze started out as a copper template, which then I pushed the color around a little bit. The chrome is a default chrome template, which looks pretty good. And finally, the lit glass. It started as a matte color material. I added in a soft warm yellow, and then scrolled down here to the self-illumination section. This is how we make things look like they're giving off light. If we'd like, they can actually illuminate the scene depending on how we're bouncing light, but sometimes it's cheaper to make it look right rather than being physically correct. I've turned on unitless and put a value in here of 0.1. It looks fairly lit, but I'll have to see when I get my lighting in place. I've got those objects selected, and I'll click on the Assign Material to Selection button. Now the chandelier glass at least looks fairly close, and I can always tune it. I'll go back to this Select by Name dialog and invert that selection. There's an invert button here on the right. And now with those picked, I can assign my bronze. I'll select it and assign it. Notice that even though I had the groups selected, they don't get a material because they aren't objects, they're groups, and so it just goes on the bronze housing. Now I'll choose Group, Close, and my chandeliers look much better. I'll exit the isolation, and now I'm ready for the floor. What we're going to do is use an image as part of a material. I'll press M for my material editor one more time. Notice that it's okay to bounce back and forth in it. I'll double click on Arc and Design and make a material here called Flooring Checkers. I have two kinds of flooring. There's a terrazzo here in Checkers, and terrazzo is a poured stone of chips in a matrix with metal dividers. What we'll do first, again, is get the reflectivity and gloss nailed down. Maybe 0.6 and 0.5, so it's got a pretty good shine to the floor. After all, it is polished. Then we'll get the material in. I'll click on the square next to the color. This lets me add in a map as part of that material. Up-up's the Material Map Browser. And what this does is lets us pick either a bitmap, which is any pixel-based image, or insert a procedural, such as noise or mix or a mask or a generated marble or something similar, to define how a particular part of a material looks. I'll double-click on bitmap, and it browses right to the Scene Assets Images folder. And this is another reason why project management is so important. It went right here, and there's the images I've created for this project. I'll pick Terrazzo Checkers, and if you'd like, you can view this image and see what it looks like. There's the chips in a matrix, and it's ready for application. I'll click Open, and now my material is checkered. I'll also click up on top of the material editor, Show Shaded Material in Viewport, so when I apply it I can see those checkers. I'll pick my green main flooring pieces, spinning around to make sure I catch them all. Holding Control to add to the selection and pressing F4 to turn on a wireframe on shaded or edged faces so I can see what I'm doing. I'll pick all of them, and now I'm ready to assign that material. Pressing M and assigning the material to selection. What we can see here is that the checkers are perhaps not quite the right shape. They're smeared, blurry, and stretched. I need to apply mapping to these objects. UVW maps tell textures how to behave, how big to be, where to start, and how often to repeat. On the modifier list on the command panel under the bent blue tube, which is the modifier tab, I'll drop down and choose UVW map. In the UVW map, the length and width is in scene units, which in this case are inches. I'll put in 144 and 144, and now I've got much nicer checkers. I can also rotate this mapping, pressing E for rotation, and right-clicking and choosing Gizmo. A gizmo for us is part of a modifier, such as this mapping, which in this case starts right here in the yellow square. I've pressed A for my angle snap, and I'm going to rotate this mapping 45 degrees. This is a nice way to open up a room, turning the flooring on the diagonal, and letting that material stream across the surface rather than having hard lines dividing it. Now I'll deal with the wall mural. I've got two other parts of the flooring to deal with, the rings and the pink strips in the middle. I can assign the same material and reorient the mapping, or I've also created a solid color terrazzo to use, but I'd like to get the wall mural on first. I'll pick the wall at the end and press M for materials. I'll make a new material and name it wall mural. For this wall mural, I'm going to dial back the reflectivity and glossiness, as it should have a nice sheen without being overly shiny. Now I'll click on the square next to the color and double-click on bitmap. A lot of things we use are bitmap images. Not necessarily a BMP file, but a pixel-based image. And you'll find this is true in both animation and games. Down at the bottom of the Scene Assets Images is World Map Mural C. I'll select it and pick Open, and tell this material, Show Shaded Material in the Viewport. Now I'll assign this material to the wall at the end, and I've already mapped this surface, and so it sticks right on. There's a mural of the world, showing the possibilities of travel, especially by train as we're in a train station. The last part then would be to get the baseboard on, once I've dealt with the rest of the floor. I'll select it, make another new material called terracotta tile, and assign that to the baseboard. For this material, the terracotta, first I'll put a bitmap in the main color. If you notice a pattern here, that's correct. This is something we do fairly often. I'm going to use this one called Floor Tile C, a terracotta I've made previously. I'll click Open. Make sure I tell this material to Show Shaded in the View, and assign it. Then I'll scroll down into the Bump section. Under Special Purpose Maps is Bump, and there's a None slot next to it. I'll click on the slot that says None, and choose Normal Bump. What I've done here for this material is create an additional map that defines the surface relief of the tile. I'll click on the normal bump I've just made, click on the None slot next to Normal, and pick Bitmap. In the bitmaps, I'll choose Floor Tile N, and we'll take a look at it. What we can see here is it's a blue map with some rainbow colors going on. What this actually means is that it's describing the way the tile sticks out of the surface. Blue is strength and red and green are direction, so the tiles actually have a slight softened edge. I'll click Open, and with the material assigned, I need to map that baseboard. In this case, I'll use a box mapping, dropping down on the modifier list and choosing UVW map. We can get very sophisticated in our unwrapping or our mapping of textures, but for now we're using a fairly simple one. I'll pick Box, and I'll set the length, width, and height here to 32. Now I've got small tiles all the way around. Instead of projecting from a plane like we did on the floor, a box map projects six-sided all the way around. So most things in an object will get covered pretty nicely, and it's a great way to handle baseboard like this. Now I'll go into my room and see what it looks like, and then start in on the rest of the floor. We want to get our materials all ready, so when we start in with our lighting, the light is looking correct, shining correctly on the material. We can see we need to deal with the ticket booth as well. I'll open that group and assign the materials I've made. Maybe my terracotta tile will go on the small walls and the counter, and some of my accent wall colors can go on the columns and support structure. Dealing with your materials is an important step. That way your lights look right. Lights need material, and materials need light. As long as you do both, you'll be in good shape. So we'll get the rest of the materials on, and start in on lighting in the next chapter.